All right, I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me, but I assume you've been keeping on top of the Catalyst Working Group financial budgets, but as the person sort of, who put it up and the accountable person for the Catalyst budget, thought it's useful just to sink in every now and then and make sure everyone's on the same page about it. Catalysts are making a small surplus per month at the moment. And, oh, Charlie's got the doc there. Can you just give me the name of that file?
Foundation Financial Forecast 2020.
Thank you. Then I'll see the same thing you do. And so the recollection I have from that, yeah, it's $200 a month surplus. I'm still on $1,000 a month, and that's like I've indicated I'd like to drop that down to 400-ish, and I'll do it as soon as other sponsors set up. And there's been a fairly long running project about, internally it's called like Catalyst Sponsorship Reimagining or something like this, but a process to sort of solicit sponsorship from the community for the Catalyst Working Group. And that's underway, and it will get done sometime this year probably. So I feel like we'll be able to get something which I'm aiming for, like a $500 surplus a month or so. And I believe the total amount the Catalysts have in the bank is like $3 or $4 grand. And I'm not sure whether, is that the actuals versus forecast sheet which sees that?
Yeah, you should be able to find the latest
4.3. Yeah, so I see it's sort of like 4.3 down the bottom for the working group. The plan is to get that up to enough that we can have a third Catalyst for 3 months of handover when John steps out next April. So that's sort of the update on the budget. The only other, I guess, discussion point for me was when we initially set it up, which I believe was 2018 maybe. It was a $7,000 or $8,000 loan from CORE to the Catalyst Working Group, with the expectation the Catalyst Working Group would pay that back over some period. And so I was kind of keen to check on that and say, is that still what you'd like to have happen? If so, we can start to budget in when the repayments will be, but it'll probably be pretty slow. And that's the update pretty much.
Sweet, thank you. So I guess there's that question for us. Do we expect the loan to be repaid? And any other concerns or questions or discussion points that people are having about Catalyst at the moment? Now's the time.
I've also got a Catalyst Working Group meeting right after this.
Okay.
So John, when you say he's out, JB? Sorry, Charlie. Oh, when is John out, and then when is Joriam? When does his term come to an end?
Probably a year later. I think they're offset each other by a year. I don't know if John hit 2 years this April or 3. I think the next year is 3 years. Next April is 3 years for him. I'd have to double check that properly though. But I think he's gone to a 3-year term, and it's feeling like he's all planning to step out.
Is there a current plan for warming up for recruitment? Just from the posture of MVB, I think it took us a lot longer than we thought to find replacements for Bart and Hans.
Yeah, this is the plan is to start the recruitment in the second part of this year, and there's been a lot of talk and thinking about it, but there'll be some kind of, hey, apply here if you want to be a Catalyst process. I think there'll also be a bit of shoulder tapping of like, hey, you should apply to be a Catalyst, and leaning on people who have been in working groups before and have been part of the Catalyst circle or understand the work a little bit, and then resourcing a decent amount of handover time is the main strategy. But yeah, hopefully we'll have someone queued up before the end of the year or early next year, aiming for they start in April. But there's a fair bit of flexibility around that, I think.
Is it still your belief that 2 generalist Catalysts is the way to go, or looking at having 1 generalist Catalyst and maybe a few funded working groups?
I don't think one. I think one's too risky. If Joriam had been a sole Catalyst when his family stuff was going on, I think that would have impaired the network. That could impair the network quite a lot. and the risk of a catalyst stepping back on short notice and people having to hire a new one, I feel is just too risky to have a single one. I also think that a single catalyst can stay in their bubble too much. And it's like the idea of two catalysts to sort of help expand each other's horizons. They get enough, what would you say, echo chamber between them. Having the working group who checks in with regularly, sort of, I find we're often like an echo chamber bouncer or breaker. So that's the conversations they're having, which make sense to the two of them, may not make sense when there's 7 of us around a circle. And so my concern with one catalyst would be not enough of that.
I'm just looking at this list of the sponsorship and I'm feeling like this is pretty risky. I feel like you had very strongly indicated your need to step back from 1,000 a month a year ago, and that still hasn't happened. And I'm looking at the other significant contributors, and I'm feeling a lot of risk there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'd say that risk is accurate.
So what are the mitigating strategies?
So the reimagine, we got the catalysts to do a workshop with Karen Tuft, the Lisa Gill's mentor. Is that the right name? I think it is.
Karen Tenelius from TUF.
Oh, from TUF, yep. So she basically gave them a workshop on like selling and sales technique and process, which they found really useful, came back quite energized with a plan on how to solicit sponsorships from the network. That got a little bit delayed with catalysts not being in sync with each other for like coming to meetings and whatnot. So tonight is the night where I hope to get that locked down about what it looks like. My take on where I'd like to see it, I'm not sure if we will see it this way, is that catalysts, each of them has 3 or 4 one-on-one conversations with a contributor every week. And this is just part of catalyzing. It's just one-on-one. Hey, how are you going in the network? What's your full basket look like? What's your empty basket look like? Anything I can help you out with, just checking in. And there's also the opportunity for, hey, do you value catalysts and would you like to sponsor us, in more of a ongoing, here's how they can continually ask people, rather than a big push every 3 months of like Wikipedia style of, hey, everyone, fund the catalyst for another year, sign up now, and so on. But it'll be one of either of those two models that we look at. But essentially, the catalysts are being trained to become self-supporting in terms of soliciting sponsorship, rather than having other people in the network solicit sponsorship for them or sponsor them. And I think that's changed a lot in the way the catalysts have been set up from when John started and when Joram started. But work keeps going, and I think it'll be a key part of what the catalyst role looks like in the future, is to ensure it's self-sustainable.
Is there an estimate about like how much time they would have to spend doing that versus doing the actual catalyst work?
I think it depends on the model a little bit. For example, doing one-on-one check-ins with contributors, I think would be excellent catalyst work. And just of like, hey, you should talk to so-and-so, etc. Just like making connections, building relationships. And so I think that would have a pretty low weight of distraction from core mission. I think running a big campaign could be quite distracting. Let's do a catalyst sponsorship thing. Let's get lots of people understanding it and talking about it and signing up to it. And let's do that periodically. So my hope is that we can find something which is not too distracting, but time will tell.
I just wonder, with the sort of funnel of money coming into Foundation, whether like supporting the catalyst should be one of the core budget items, or was it always the idea that it's not an essential part of what we're doing?
I think it was more that the core could never afford it. And again, it's how money flows in Spiral, I think, is an open question about where it goes. Essentially, the way this evolved was the core had some funding, co-budget had some funding. There was no sustainable source for catalysts. So we basically went out directly to get sponsor the catalyst program to ensure that was done. But if it was a case of, okay, let's get people just to sponsor in Spiral, and then the board says, okay, here's how much we'll spend on catalyst, and it's an ongoing budget, it moves into your core expenses, that model would work. And at the moment, one of the things that I think we've been aware of in the Catalyst Working Group is the intention of more people paid to work on in Spiral, more funded working groups, or more funded contracts. Co-budget's a way to do that in a populist sort of way, but I think there's always a way of discretionary once-off project funding. If we had more money, like say we were running a surplus of 500 a month or 1,000 a month, I think we would move to a model of Catalyst having a discretionary budget to pay people to work on the Corbin spiral as they saw fit. They've got their $500 a month budget, and they can just start writing little contracts for people to do work, which is different from funding a working group because, but you know, and hopefully we can move to more working groups which do have a stream of funding. But how the money flows, whether we want to keep going with increasing sponsorships to the Catalyst directly in parallel to funding co-budget and funding the core, whether we just want to get everyone funding the core and MVB decides how much money to pay Catalyst, and do you bump their budget versus another working group budget, is kind of, you know, that's an open question, which I don't know when or if or who wants to help tackle it.
And this reminds me of this, you know, like our intention is that these kind of strategic questions live in the network, and our job is just to make sure that like we're keeping an eye on it and making sure that it's getting the attention it needs. And I have this feeling I've had for a long time that I wonder how much visibility there is on the current Catalyst sponsorship. Like if people actually recognize that there's like you, for instance, putting $1,000 a month, there's other people doing 500 or 300, like it's a really major contribution. It's really significant. And I don't know if people recognize it. And part of, you know, like one of the Eleanor Ostrom's principles of how to manage a commons is like people have to actually be able to see each other's contributions and what they're giving and what they're taking. And I don't know if we can, I mean, one thing we can do, which is really simple at least, is like in our report from this meeting today, we can, hey, look, this is something that's happening. We want to have more sponsorship. We want to diffuse this risk a bit across more people. This is coming. But it does, to me, there's something underlying that feels, the more that we're, like the less local we are, the more we have to engineer stuff in to make up for the lack of proximity, I think. I'm not sure how to do that or when, but it's just something that's been percolating for a while. Also, this, yeah, go Charlie.
Oh, yeah, we could just include with this month's report just a screenshot of that spreadsheet so that people don't have to like fish around for it. It's just right there.
Yeah.
I also think that the board naming it as a risk, we see risk in who and how many people are funding Catalysts, if any of them fall over, because we had a few people fall over and it was only Lisa Gill stepping in, which filled the gap. And she did that because she was on the Catalyst working group and she saw that gap as it emerged and said, I was wanting to fund Catalyst anyway. And it all sort of lined out really well. But that was quite fortunate, and I wouldn't want to rely on that process in the future. So I think more people funding it and oversubscribing it would be pretty important to see this be, you know, for it to feel safe. It still feels risky to me, hence, you know, paying more than I think I would like to.
Yeah. And
Do I need to write that in as an action?
I've got it.
You pay?
I've got it. I'll do the report back today, so it's in my mind. We've still got this question then about the loan, and do we have expectations of it being repaid? I can say just from my own personal perspective, no. I think the core is fine, and if we had surplus, I'd be pushing it towards Catalyst anyway. But I'm curious if the others feel it's important that we should be sticking to that original agreement and asking the Catalyst to repay.
Well, this was before my time. I didn't realize it was a loan, so I just thought it was like a grant sort of contributed to that pilot program.
I remember that meeting where it was decided. I think, Susan, did you have thoughts? Because I remember you were quite, you had strong thoughts about it, but I can't remember what they were. You had a good reasoning for why you wanted it to be a loan, I think.
I don't recall personally having strong thoughts. I recall former MVB members having really strong thoughts about it. I am really happy reframing it as a grant, but there is, I would be remiss if I didn't say that there is a little bit inside me that is this setting a precedent? And do we care?
The precedent being us giving loans to people and then
saying
later
oh,
on deciding it was a grant.
just joking, it was a gift. Yeah.
Yeah.
My memory.
It doesn't
My
feel.
memory
Yeah.
sorry, my memory of the discussion was that it was, I guess, just not at the time going, yes, here, have this money. It was more, okay, yes, here, have this money, but let's kind of just put this thing in where we can discuss it and reconsider it at a later point, was my memory of that discussion. But I was pretty new into things, so I might have that wrong. So it's kind of like the intention was, yeah, this is probably something that you can keep, but let's build this, you know, this thing in case we change our mind for some reason.
Wow, it was less than a year ago. I just posted the link in your Slack channel to the funding agreement, that at least the one that I'm aware of. And yeah, September 2019 was when we did the deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's any like time frame urgency on this. The working group is operating under the assumption that it is a loan. First priority is to get the working group in a cash flow positive situation. Then the next step is to figure out what we do with the surplus. And so if you wanted to think about it, that's cool. If the board wanted to forgive it, you know, that'd be easier for the working group, but I understand the points about the precedent, so I didn't have an opinion about the best course of action. Just wanted to make sure that it was, you know, people were aware of it and it's doing what you want it to do.
I know you're not going to want to hear this, JB, but I would much rather if there was some sort of a payback, it being to compensate your very clear need of not putting in $1,000 a month.
I don't have a need. It's like it's less than 10% of my income, so it's affordable. And I've been earning really well, and I'm full time on Academy now, so I'm not going backwards financially chipping this in. It's just I'm aware of the risk as well, and it's like if you look at me through Pandas, me through Academy, and me directly, I'm still at the root of a lot of that funding, either by direct generation or by influence of the funding I've got control over. I'm also really aware of when we were scrambling to fund the Catalyst, we basically raided the core piggy bank. Who's giving money to the core already that we can convince to give money to Catalyst as well as the core or instead of? And that's how we got it done. We weren't able to generate enough new funding to actually fund the Catalysts. So yeah, it's just like a robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of dynamic, I think, that we got it done with. But it does feel like the core is in a good spot. I'm not sure what rate we're tipping into co-budget and whether that feels good for the board or for other people, and whether we want a faster rate or a slower rate for co-budget rounds. But yeah, I've really just been focusing on the Catalyst working group as a small unit and leaving it for other people to think more about the whole. But if people want to jam on overall financial streams in Inspire, I'm really happy to jump into that discussion. I would just say I'd like to see the Catalyst, my goal with the Catalyst working group, to get them funded so they have a $500 to $1,000 a month discretionary budget. They have a good 3-4 month runway in the bank, and they've got enough budget to prepay Catalyst handovers, so that you get the 3 months of 3 Catalysts without having to do extra things. And if we can get to that level, that feels like what sustainability looks like for the Catalyst working group. Anything over that would be when I'd start to say, okay, how quickly can we pay back this loan to the core?
Yeah, that's really good. Fits my picture too. One thing that doesn't fully sit with me either is this thing about sponsorship. Like, if all of their money is coming from sponsorship, which to me feels like a kind of charity mode, I'm looking for a more social enterprise mode. Like, what are people buying? And I've been thinking about, like, especially doing this assembly and hearing from what it's like to be a newcomer arriving into the network and thinking about how we're more distributed and stuff, and wondering if there's like some kind of programs that the Catalyst could be running, which are like facilitated engagement over a number of weeks, and people pay to participate, and part of that is going to actually pay the Catalyst for the rest of the year. Or if there's other kind of entrepreneurial stuff that they could be doing that people would feel like, oh yeah, it makes sense for me to put $200 in at this point, or $500, whatever it is, and that I'm getting the value, and also I see that I'm contributing to the commons at the same time.
To some extent, I agree that there needs to be people buying something, but I think a lot of, and this is where the conversations with Karen and the sales thing is like, what's the value you've been getting from Inspiral? What's the value you've been getting from your relationships in this community? The Catalysts are here to make all of them possible. And I think drawing that connection in people's heads with the value I get from Inspiral is done because Catalysts do that work. If I want that value to continue, I need to help Swirl Catalysts, I think is one of them. Another one was who's been getting value from Inspiral and who loves Inspiral. And having that as if lots of people get value but no one loves it, they won't fund it anymore. And I think that's a healthy dynamic to put at the heart of our financial flows. In that if people fall out of love with Inspiral, it's kind of dead anyway. But I don't know. Really, if I would say that for this team, if we were to have a task of build a enterprise or build something we're selling, it would be quite daunting. And I think they need a lot of support to get it over the line. If we came up with, here's a course, we've vetted it, we've priced it, we'll sell it for you, and you just need to deliver it, I think they might be up for that kind of thing, but I wouldn't bet on them being able to create an enterprise.
That brings up for me, Rich, is that I think that there would be quite a few others in Spiral that might be up for building something to sell that might not have the energy to be full-time catalysts as well.
I feel like we're just talking about ventures then, or like livelihoods. Like if Rich builds a great course and starts selling it, then it's just like, that's just Rich's entrepreneurship and livelihood. And then it's a case of if Rich starts to do well, you know, the hope is that Rich would start to fund catalysts or whatnot. And I think it's that idea of helping individuals drive economic growth rather than have enterprise Spiral owned businesses in a way.
I think the slight difference that I'm seeing is that what I heard Rich saying was that you know, some training or courses or whatever designed to enhance and Spiral specifically, not to build skills elsewhere. But yeah, maybe that's splitting hairs.
So the customers are all Inspiral contributors being the defining factor.
The customer, well, no, the defining factor is it's a course or a training meant to have a direct impact on Inspiral, the thing. Not necessarily have to be, well, by default, it probably would mostly be Inspiral contributors and people. But, so if the remit for the catalyst is to do the work, the doing work on Inspiral, the entity, that would be the differentiator. But I'm not sure it makes sense either way.
Anything else you want to know or talk about on the Catalyst front?
Is there any way that you would like to be reported to in terms of the Catalyst budget stuff?
No, I'm really happy with what we've got. That spreadsheet is fine in terms of we've got the monthlies. We can see if we're going forward or going backward on the monthly spend. And we've got the cash balance in the actual versus forecast. And so if I just know those spots, that's perfect. I would like to get the cash balance into the same sheet as the forecast or have one spot rather than jumping around them, but that's a minor request.
I have a request. Don't know how the other boardies think about it, but for me, the succession is quite important. The thing of like not having too long terms, just rotating different people through the role. Like I think, basically I think if John stuck around for too much longer, it would be less about a catalyst and more like a manager. So it's important for me that there's turnover, and I just, when I asked about it, what I heard was like, oh, we haven't got enough money yet to hire a third person. And I was like, okay, but I mean, I'm not getting paid to be on the board and I'm quite happy to make this contribution. So I wouldn't like that to be a hard line that says if we can't pay for it, then we're not having a third one. So I wonder what other boardies think about that, but also what your sense is of the working group. Like, is there are people prioritizing paying people or getting a third one?
You mean a third in addition to the two?
Yeah.
No, I don't think we've had the conversation about a third volunteer catalyst and the idea of recruiting for a volunteer catalyst. And one of the ideas I think is that finding someone who wants to volunteer 20 hours a week for 2 years on Inspiral is a pretty big ask. And I don't think a catalyst works as a 5-hour role, even 5 hours a week. I think it's that density of content or context, which is important in the role. And I think it's also, it's not a 3-month gig. Being like hey, I'll help the catalyst for 3 months, join a working group. I feel like there's something about Catalyst, which is the 2-year term and the 20-hour a week, which makes it a valuable role, no matter what we call it or what the job description is. We haven't considered that. If you think someone would do it, sure, we could try. I'd absolutely say, yeah.
I don't think that's what Rich is saying. Maybe it was, but what I thought when you suggested that, Rich, is that during the period of time of the handover, possibly somebody would step up and say, right, I'll do my 3-month training. Then when John steps back, then I get paid. It's not. I don't think there was an expectation of somebody working for free at all, but in this intervening period, doing your apprenticeship for free or a little bit could be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't, my view is it's not that we don't have enough money to hire a third catalyst, which is saying why we're doing it next April. If the prompt is, should we move that forward? Should we try and get a new catalyst this year and have them on board by December? That's definitely, we could have that conversation. I hear you that the two-year term is a good thing. 3-year is the upper limit. And I feel like John's coming to the absolute upper limit of the appropriate time in the role. But it's it feels, I would rather see the energy going right now into securing sustainable funding moving forward, rather than getting a new catalyst and not having that as strong, because I think a new catalyst coming in is the least confident in terms of fundraising from what we've seen so far.
Just one quick question in terms of like the budget for individual roles, is the rate just based on the living wage, or how do you factor that in?
I can't remember. I think it was a 25 an hour living wage sort of thing initially. And I don't remember the conversation we had about Jorian's rate and where it came from.
And my last word on this is I'd really love it if the third catalyst is in Melbourne, and that we're being intentional about how we're using the regions.
Yeah, I agree.
Melbourne, how come Melbourne?
Because we've got New Zealand and we've got Europe, but we don't have anyone in Aussie. And it feels like they're on the tipping point of like just about ready to spark up a lot of community energy there. So it'd be cool to have someone on the ground. Any last words for Joshua before we say thank you? And you're welcome to stick around for the rest of the meeting too, if you want.
Cheers. I might step out because I've got the catalyst call starting at 15.
Sweet. Thanks very much.
Cool. No, thanks heaps for all the MVBing you're doing. I love seeing the spreadsheets and the updates and the disciplined rigor of it. I hope you're having an enjoyable and it's not feeling too complex or overwhelming time of it. And yeah, thanks for your mahi.
Cheers, Manny.
Take care.
Ciao. So we have 45 minutes left on the clock. Charlie, do you want to take us on a tour of the metrics? And then we can go through the actions and see what else is popping.
Sure. Oops. Please, can someone allow me to share?
You have my blessing.
Thank you. All right. Okay. Here we are. Let's just jump back to, well, yeah, Catalyst is the first one to look at. We're still waiting on the wash up of the winter retreat. So yeah, there's nothing really to report on gatherings in terms of that. But we've been diving into this sheet. In terms of the subscription summary, it's still very much the same. I think we gained a beer and lost a coffee or two, but it's relatively the same. 77% of the core is by individuals and about 23% is ventures. So this is the, again, the venture core contribution in the upper right over here. Yeah. And no projects. This tab's just for if we anticipate particular funded projects coming up, and we don't have any. This is it better if I just go to the actual versus forecast, because the rest of these tabs feed into this thing?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, there's not much to say other than the net profit is lower than the previous months. And I think that's to do with the number of annual subscriptions that had come up in May and June. That was a big cluster of annual subscriptions, and now we're getting into a slightly more quiet period of those coming through. So that's my understanding of why that's lower. The main thing that I need to piece together is the actual cash balance of the working groups account is different than what the virtual cash balance is by quite a bit. And my feeling on that, it's to do with the, again, the winter retreat and having shuffled some funds virtually and non-virtually. So I just need to take a closer look at that with my ops eyes on, but I don't feel too worried about it in terms of it being a major slip up or anything like that. If we just bring this up, so this is what I developed with Susan's instructions from the previous couple of months. It doesn't look beautiful, but as we can see here, what this is doing is we're just taking the 3-month average of company contributions and then 3-month average of individual contributions, and then the 3-month average of expenses, and then seeing what it actually was this month and coming up with the differences. And what we see here is what we're trying to look for is if there's a consecutive downward trend. So let's say 3 months in a row, this number here is more than minus 500, then that's where we would start to raise some flags. I think I should put this in a little image somewhere else, but I'll just bring up the formatting rules so you can see more what I mean. So you can see if it's less than negative 500, then it's still green. But if it's more than, if it's less than negative 500, then it's cautionary yellow. We didn't come up with a red signifier yet, other than if it's yellow 3 times in a row, then it becomes red type of thing. So this is just a reverse. If the expenses is less than 500 3 months in a row, then it would go yellow. And we post it here in Lumio as a little nice looking traffic light, and this links through to that same sheet. I haven't had to find a yellow icon yet, so when that comes along, I'll choose a different one. Yeah, and what I've just said is sort of here in the report. We had just a little bit over the resting balance, so we were able to put 451 into the mission account. This is just me commenting on the difference in the working groups account. And this is just noting that the combination of the mission account plus what's sitting in co-budget is around the 19,576 mark. And as such, as I'm doing right now, I'll report this to the board for considering the next co-budget round.
Cool, thank you. Are there other questions when you other folks saw that? Did you see anything else other than the co-budget round? Were there other discussion points that came up?
Can you just, sorry, go back to the member contributor spreadsheet? What's the, what would be really cool is if we could see a 3-month running on, yeah, what would be great is if we could see a 3-month running any deltas on contributor numbers. That would be really cool. Just like in a snapshot, if we could see numbers going up or down. Sorry, you're on mute.
Can you, yeah, can you say that in different words?
So I'd love for, at our MVBs, we could see the last 3 months of member and contributor numbers, so we can just note any variances.
All right, well, let's just have a look then at this sheet, because that's what this shows.
Okay.
this is just actual versus forecast.
Gotcha.
So we have, oh, sorry. Let me just, I could put notes down here for each of these in case anyone else comes along to wonder what is going on. Actual subscribers is how many subscriptions there are of people paying money. Contributors is the number of total humans that have been onboarded to the network. This is the number of members, of course, and these are the number of co-budget buckets that get paid out because that factors into the administrative costs. Same with onboards, but in terms of numbers, this is the number of onboards and offboards, so it's a net of 0, basically. If we look back over the last 3 months, yeah, it's been a slow growth since the Summerfest. Yeah. Is there anything else?
Going in the right direction. That's all I care about. Thanks, Charlie.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so we should talk about the co-budget then, eh? Like we're really close to the 20,000, which we had sort of said be a good time to think about it. Are there any reasons not to open up another co-budget round? I guess we need someone who's going to be facilitating it, right?
Yeah, and I think that there had been some mumblings about maybe this time trying another form of participatory budgeting, if somebody had energy for that, not necessarily always defaulting to co-budget, which is the easiest. And I can't imagine another process that would be as straightforward, but I just wanted to note that that had been an aspiration, or at least an invitation.
One noticing I have is that I guess it's delegated to the board really to come up with the core budget, and then, but it's sort of unclear like how the core budget decisions are made over time, other than us people sitting here talking about it. So just noting that thought, like what's the cadence of core budgeting and how does that happen?
I mean, I think up until now, we've been doing it as necessary, and it's never happened more than once a year. And I think it's only happened once since we balanced the books. So I think it's a really good question, and I don't think there's a solid agreement.
Charlie, do you have from Upside, are there any specific rhythms that would make sense for us to be syncing up with on that stuff? Or we could just choose something arbitrarily and say like, at this point in the year, we're going to review it.
Well, I guess, and from an accounting point of view, Fairground review their deal on an annual basis around the end of the financial year. Optimi doesn't have a regular cadence of reviewing that contract. I would say the newsletter doesn't seem to have a regular cadence of reviewing what's happening there. So yeah, it's all been a bit murky in terms of that.
I think we've been kind of nibbling away at it every month in a way, right? It's like, yeah, there was the balancing the books, which was kind of a recovery from no one having been paying enough attention. And now we just kind of look at it every month and go, oh yeah, this and that. But maybe it would be helpful even if we had a 6-month cadence or something that we put in our long-term calendar, and we know there's going to be a dedicated focal point where we're going to look at all the numbers and have a bit of a strategy, especially because it's when we get to this point of like, should we open this gate of $20,000 or not? Like, it's a pretty significant decision, and it'd be good to have a bit more context around that, right?
Yeah, like it would be good to know, like, how long did it take for that to accumulate, and was it just because we've like reframed the accounts that was able to happen? And then, is it going to be another 4 years before that fills up again? it's hard to know. Then if we have a future forecasting focus.
Well, I wonder, has anyone got any concerns if I say that we put this in the long-term calendar, that maybe every 6 months we have one of our meetings is specifically more focused on the budget?
I'm a bit behind the 8 ball with what this conversation is, so I don't have an opinion either way. I'm just trying to play catch up.
There's a thumbs up from Susan. I think, Nancy, the proposal is instead of just looking at the budget once a month and kind of like dealing with whatever decisions come up, having a more long-term like focus, choosing a rhythm where we look more strategically at what's the long-term view and like spending more time looking at all of the variables in the budget and going, what are we doing here? And does it make sense?
Okay. Sorry, I thought we were talking co-budget. Yes, general budget you're talking about.
The general core budget. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. That explains a lot.
So maybe we should do the first one in a month or two or something.
I mean, I'm really interested in Charlie's question about where does the money for the 20,000 come from? It seems like the money is there now because we reoriented our runway account, and I think maybe even before we push the button, it would be healthy for us to share with the network that either this may be the last time we're able to do it this way, or we need to think of a new fundraising strategy to be able to do this regularly. Because because obviously in the olden days, before the balancing the books, it was clear that we were accumulating co-budget funds because half of everything that everybody put in was going to co-budget, and that's not the way anymore. So I think I'm not sure that all contributors realize that their coffee, beer, and pizza goes just to cover core costs and doesn't have anything to do with co-budgeting. I'm just not sure that's clear.
I don't think it's clear. It's not clear in my head. Like now that you say it, I'm like, oh yeah, I do kind of know that, but I've probably told people recently that, yeah, we've got this 50-50 thing, and it's and it's not actually like that anymore. So that seems like an important part of the decision, or I'd like to be able to communicate where did the money come from and what's our expectations about the future.
I mean, I'm happy to take a little project to figure out how to communicate it, and maybe, again, Charlie, if you'd like to pair with me on it to try to figure out where that money came from, because unless we can have that discussion now, because I don't know if I'm missing something, but I can't see, unless the way that the venture contributions, because of some of the venture contributions are allocated specifically to co-budget, but that's all. So I think that if we do that calculation and figure that out, it's not going to be more than probably 1,000 a month. Maybe it's a little more. And maybe that's enough to get us up to a co-budget round every year. But if the humans of Inspiral want to be funding projects more regularly, then we might have to put up a different proposal for how anybody in the network who wants to could create like a co-budget saver account, for example.
Another thought I have is just wondering about some additional physics around the mission account. Like, what if a certain amount of the mission account then emptied into co-budget? So then it wasn't a question of how much is going in there from month to month. Almost like, you know how we've got a resting balance for the income and expenses account? What if we came up with an additional resting balance of the mission account? So that sort of flows into mission account first. And then if the mission account then, as a result of that balance was higher than a certain amount, then that flooded into co-budget. So it wasn't an all at once process, but a more of a waterfall effect. But is that stepping outside of my role as a board member?
That's what I'm that's what was totally coming up for me. That sounds like a question or modeling to be done by the once but no more financial working group.
Well, maybe that's one way to have the communication, Susan, is to activate that working group just for a period of time to help answer some of these questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to make that invitation. Rich, Nancy?
I guess what I'm hearing is a little bit of conservative between us. There's kind of like, oh, maybe we shouldn't just flood this 20 grand into the network if we're not really confident that it's going to rebuild rapidly.
I don't think I'm saying, I don't think I'm thinking that, but I'm thinking that I think that it's incumbent upon us as the compliance guardians to ensure that the network has a clear view of that.
Yeah.
Not that we shouldn't do it, but that, let's do some due diligence around the numbers.
And emphasize the difference between core and co-budgeted funds. And like, we can open this gate, but we don't know when it's going to be open again unless we all start contributing more.
One action that comes up to mind for me is I could just add a tab that's like the co-budget version of the Catalyst working group, so that we can just see how much is just going in from month to month, and we know nothing's being spent until we have a round. So.
Can someone just give me a shorthand on any outcomes or actions there that I need to have made sure I've recorded? Because I've kind of got a few of them there, but I'm not sure if any of them are sticking.
Yeah, sure. Susan and I are going to pair on a communication to the network about finances.
Okay.
And one second action is for me to really quickly chalk up a co-budget tab within the financial forecast sheet.
And one of our actions might be to make an invitation to reconstitute a finance working group.
Say that again. Sorry, again, Susan.
One of the outcomes might be for Charlie and I to make an invitation to reconstitute a finance working group to manage this conundrum, so that it's not, because it doesn't feel to Charlie or I that this is a board job.
There's a little voice in me wondering if we shouldn't open co-budget unless there is a financial working group that's holding that. And that we can just let that number grow as bait.
Yeah, because then they could be responsible for deciding, like, oh, are we going to have a co-budget facilitator? How's it all going to happen? That sort of thing, which really shouldn't be with the board. We should just be there to ensure the financial health of the core is intact at the end of it.
Yeah, that feels right to me.
Do I need to put that in?
Well, this is, yeah, I'm thinking about the report that's going out to the network, and the same as the previous conversation, it's really all about finances, right? So it's kind of like at this stage, Charlie and Susan are going to work out the details. If that's sweet as. And then shall we move along? See what else is on the stack. I can share my screen and we'll run through the actions and give each other updates on where they're at. So, Susan, any update on the comms working group? You were asking them what they needed.
Yeah, it's all good. We had a meeting. We're meeting once every 6 weeks, and it's sort of in holding pattern around when the website drops and having a plan around that. So I think if you want to make that like a recurring task for me, to just regularly be checking in with them, and as a I guess a cursory member of that working group.
I'm going to call that one done just because it makes me feel good. And get that out of the way later. Okay. And then the health and safety.
So I sent everybody the health and safety guidelines, and the invitation was for us all to read them and to make it an action item at our next MVB. Doesn't look like that's going to happen today. So can I then make a proposal that I'll remind everybody a week out from our next MVB, and then we can have a conversation about it.
There we go. It's on September. Actions. Let's call this task done then. I just like things being done.
Cool.
I haven't asked the pods about the wellbeing survey because I was sort of waiting on that conversation about health and safety. So I might leave that one on the stack. Ask Assembly about updating Ventures agreement for health and safety reasons. Same there. It sort of depended on that conversation. And same with the third one.
But that wasn't even part of the Assembly, was it?
No, it wasn't. But there was an idea back in May that maybe we'd have the health and safety conversation sooner and then say, hey, it's the Assembly the time. So maybe it's not about asking the Assembly group, but it's just consider if we want to update the Ventures agreement.
Got it.
Rich, just noticing we should update the estimated complete column as well as we go.
Yeah. So this will be in September, end of September. Good spotting. So we've got some handbook stuff. Finally, the handbook is working again, Charlie. JV took it off my hands. So that's good to go. And what about your parts of it?
So I didn't realize it was good to go. So I think I'll have to defer it to next month. And
Sweet.
Is it best if I've got questions about updating it to ask you or ask JB?
You can ask me. It should be just the same as usual now. Apart from that, it works.
Okay, I'll see if I can work it out.
Cool. And then we get to the website. So there's been some updates on that. Is there more to share, Nancy, but beyond what you've put in the Slack?
No, Joriam wanted to get building blocks in place, rather than give us an update tonight. So, I guess it's definitely is action happening on it. What that action actually is, I'm not too sure. Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll call this task done because it's had a bit of a bad smell about it and we put a new one in, which is like update from website team next month or 2 months away.
Yeah, I guess we've kind of been on a rhythm for the since our last meeting of me seeking regular updates. I guess it's a decision of, do we want to keep that kind of cadence going, or does it feel like there's enough movement now that we can hands off and know that it will be done? So the indications I've had are, you know, that Jorium's onto it and that he's planning on launching it by the end of this month.
Can we do it once more, please?
Yeah, so in a couple of weeks' time, or
Sure.
yeah.
Yes, it's cool. That's exciting. Thanks you for pushing that through, Nancy. It's been a bit of a massage job, but we're getting there.
Yeah, I'm a little I guess I don't understand how it works. That ultimately, you know, we as a board have a responsibility for something, which I felt a real resistance around having a transparency of what that is. Like each time I ask, it's like the answer is sort of, we've got it in hand, it's being done, you know, and there's not a detail around that, which I guess I try and weigh up, like, is this just that I'm asking for a level of detail that's not non-spiral kind of way of doing things? Yeah, it's a little unusual for me, that kind of thing. Like, yeah, but that might be how Unspiral operates, I'm not sure.
My sense has always been that it's unusual that the board would be paying attention to that level of detail, yeah.
Okay.
But it's kind of a legacy thing that we're having to tidy up, and that we've got this ambition that there's going to be a nice thriving comms working group at some point that holds these kind of things, and they can just give us very high level reports to say, yep, everything's on track, no worries. But we're kind of compensating for not having that working group.
Okay.
So it's this awkward posture where it's like you're trying to be the working group, but then not actually get the level of clarity that you need to do the job.
Yeah. And I mean, just like one thing I guess to mention here is it's since Dan did put that little patch up with the referring to Better Work Together, 70 people have clicked it in the last 3 weeks. And so that's 70 potential lots of $10 going into the Inspiral Kitty. That's the potential of $700 that, yeah. So I think that's an important, maybe not in the granularity, but I think that our overall fiduciary responsibility in lieu of a finance working group or financial holders of the Inspiral financial health, I think it does fall to us. It's my opinion.
Also nice to have that little demonstration, like we can sell things on the website, and part of the package that we hand off to the working group is like, look at this, maybe you can do more. Okay, I'm looking at the time, so I want to keep moving. Is there anything more to say about the traffic light system which you demonstrated? It seemed cool to me.
Yeah, it can always be modified, but that's what Susan and I came up with, and seems sensible to me.
Charlie, business risks
Well,
are up to my.
Yeah, I've totally missed this one, so I'll need to ask them about it. If I'm speaking from Optimize's point of view, I can say that we're documenting some of the systems, how we do things, as I'm sharing work with Katrin, so that some of documenting is happening. But yeah, I would need to bring that to them more directly to see what they have to say.
I've just put this down for next month, if that's all good. Cool. So the checking in with directors about term length, I just threw that into this this new tab that I invented called long-term calendar, and it's here in September, and then every 6 months from then on. We've got this thing. This is handy if you need have a reminder about what's coming up, you can throw it in the long-term calendar. And that's all that we need to know about that. Doesn't it feel good to make things done? Kablamo. Catalysts, agreements, assembly. Susan.
That was going to be a potential assembly sprint topic, and it didn't happen.
Seems like the assembly was fine though, right? Like this was just an idea we had, and now it passed.
I think so, and I think that it's clearly happening with the stewardship agreement.
Yeah.
Are there any other agreements that we're feeling are woefully outdated that need a chibi?
My sense is that there's one thing around the people agreement and what is membership and that sort of thing, and that conversation is moving slowly and well, and so I've got no concerns about that. We've got a working group that's going to keep that conversation moving, so that's good. Mm-hmm. The big stinky one is the ventures agreement, which has had a notice on the top of it saying since 2018, this is going to be updated soon. Don't believe it. But even that, I mean, that's fine. It's got that warning saying don't trust it. So I'm not really too worried about it.
I mean, so like I'd just love to hear from everybody or anybody that, I'm going to say this again. I think that we paid Dan Lewis money out of a bucket to rewrite the venture agreement like 2 years ago.
And who was the accountable person at that point?
I don't know. It was a bucket.
We've had different processes around how we do accountability on co-budget, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I think that maybe this is something that either Catalyst or one of us could go back to Dan and ask where he got to with it. On the ventures.
I'm just looking in co-budget at the completed buckets because I remember being very vigilant about recording financially what happened in there. So let me just bring it up to see if there's any quick things. Yeah, so yeah, 29th of March, 1,800 was paid out of this bucket to Dan for completing the work.
Can you see what the scope was?
Here's the bucket. So it looks complicated.
Yeah.
But there's no indication of what work was actually done.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
What was the date on that? Sorry, can you just go back? Was it March 2019?
Yeah, that's the end of March 2019.
I didn't
and that
see.
Could have been.
Sorry, I could have been mistaken. I didn't see anything in there specifically about rewriting the venture agreement. Maybe that was my misremembering.
Yeah, well, maybe, should we just, if this is maybe we should review it, like have a closer look at it for next month if you want, or what would you like to do?
Well, I think that's my question is the fact that the venture agreement is woefully out of date, such that there isn't really one, and doesn't seem to be any current outlines of how or when ventures can actually call themselves Inspiral Ventures. That I think it's pretty important. Either that or put it back on the brand working group to expose it as a brand risk.
My sense is that the ventures agreement was not a significant problem. Like it's just out of date. There's a warning on it saying it's out of date. At some point the energy will come to focus on it and improve it. But like, I don't know if it's like, it doesn't feel like a risk to me. It doesn't feel like it's doing significant harm. This other issue feels like a risk, which is like, what's the accountability on buckets?
Sorry, let me just tap back into the ventures. I think that I've had a couple of business owners in the network over the past 6 months or so ask, what's the process for becoming an Inspiral venture? So it might not be a risk, but it might be, again, a missed opportunity, and a missed opportunity to get some more fundage flowing through the system.
Yeah, I guess one that comes to mind, like without going into too much detail, Jorium had some contacts and he had put the question out, like, how do I add these new contributors so that they can come into the network as a venture? And my operational point of view at that point was, well, just add them as contributors and then they can be a venture or a proto venture. They can just say they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for me. Like, I feel like back in the day, Rich, back in our Catalyst days, these were the things that we were most, some of the things that we were most interested in. It doesn't, well, you know, this season of Catalyst, it doesn't seem to be a priority. And I'm curious about that, because if we're not meant to be doing this with our MVB hat on, yet the Catalyst have their different sets of priorities, I really feel like these opportunities are still important for Inspiral. And I'm not sure, you know, again, that overarching strategic lens of, you know, trying to maximize the impact potential. I'm just curious about that.
I wonder if, I think this signals to me we should have a conversation point next month on the ventures, and specifically thinking about what are the points of the ventures that the board is responsible for checking in on.
Yeah, I can buy that. We're a couple of minutes left on the clock, so let's probably have a proper conversation about it.
Like, is the hum an Inspiral venture?
No, I mean, what I've seen is that the ventures agreement has run off the cliff. It doesn't exist anymore in a meaningful way. What I've been seeing is that the main energy has been focused on individual contributors and contributions and getting that balance the books thing. And that the next opportunity to move was the assembly, which is what we noted down, but we didn't take it. And maybe it's the subsequent assembly is where there's time to like say, hey, look, there's an opportunity and we need to claim it. But until that kind of, conversation happens, my sense is that ventures are on ice. Like I haven't pushed the hum as a venture because it's just like, I don't think it exists. I mean, on our website, we use the Inspiral logo and we approve that with the brand working group and that's it. But it's not like, on the it's Inspiral, very minimal. It's on the hum website, we use the Inspiral brand, but in a very, very minimal way because it feels like that relationship is really undefined at the moment.
But it could be very interesting for the hum to be on the Inspiral website, potentially, right?
Yeah. I'm going to pause this conversation for next week. It's good. Next month. It's good. We've got a good agenda next month. There's a couple more things to look at. Let's see. I've just put an action check-in on Venturesaurus bucket. That needs a name on it though, I guess. I can do that.
Thanks, Rich.
And just to say that this thing about potentially having a financial working group, I would hope that would be part of the remit is running co-budgeting and also the accountability side of things. Here we are. So we did this one. Invite Catalyst to discuss succession. We did that too. We just did that today. That's
We
good.
did. Done.
And what about this other piece? Do they want to sync the assembly and the co-budget round? Well, that's too late now.
It is.
So we'll call it done in a way. And then Charlie, shareholder register and company's office update.
That's done. It's all updated. Everyone's legal.
Amazing.
Woohoo!
Yeah. So there's these outstanding actions. I'll reshuffle this table so that they're at the top. But the outstanding actions, I just want to, before we close, make sure that we're clear on what else is happening. These are easy. I'll do that. That's easy. Yeah, so I guess I do have a question, which is that I was thinking to report this month as I usually do. But it seems like most of the report is actually waiting on Charlie and Susan to talk finances. So should I leave it with you instead?
I don't have bandwidth. I have bandwidth for the conversation, but I'm not sure I have bandwidth for the full report back. Certainly not this week. Certainly not within the next week.
Right. I can do a little stepping stone this
That'd be
week and just
great.
say there's going to be that was the main thing we talked about, and it'll coming soon.
I'd
And I'll
appreciate
just make
that.
sure that's noted here.
Cool.
Um,
And then Nancy had a question about our next meeting.
oh yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
forgive
so
me.
a couple of things. I won't be here for our next meeting, but I also wanted to propose that we shift our meetings back to a 2-monthly rhythm rather than the monthly rhythm that we started out with.
So it's me. This is 2 months, right? Because we skipped the last one. I'm also not available next month, so that's that means that we're going to have to move, I think. Otherwise, it would just be the two of you hanging out without us.
And we didn't have a meeting in, any meetings past September scheduled. It doesn't look like. So, shall we go for, maybe we did this, just not, no. So should we go for, Thursday, the 15th of October? That seems an awfully long time away, but does that suit everybody?
Maybe a little bit sooner. Maybe we could do like the 8th or something. Make it the. Oh, actually, I can't do the 8th.
Okay.
Sorry. Well, it depends on the time actually, because the time zones are changing.
So if we did a morning, what time is it? If we did an 8 a.m., what time would that be for you on the 8th of October?
Just looking that up now because the time zones shift soon. Okay, so on October 8th, there's an 11-hour split. So that means your 8 a.m. is my 9 p.m. I'd rather, if you're up for doing an evening one, then it's like your 7 p.m. is my 8 a.m. But I could do the night if necessary.
Could you do a 7 a.m.? Because I don't like to go past 8 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah, I can do 7 a.m., which is your 6 p.m.
Yeah,
You're not-
great. All right, on the 8th.
That would be good. Yeah, that's good for me. The next week I might be in the Hawke's Bay, so couldn't do the following week.
All right, invitation sent for 6 p.m. on Thursday, the 8th of October.
Whew. And should we set that as the rhythm as the second Thursday of every second month?
Yeah, let's revisit the time at the next meeting because after that, then all the time zones would have changed.
Oh, yeah.
So it might be different. Cool.
We're over time. I'm really sorry. I let us all down.
Not at all, Rich. Not at all.
That's Susan's checkout at hour 13 and a half of the day. Go have a nap.
Bye.
I love.
See ya.
Goodbye.